nice to desire truth, actually.
Yeah. And, like I just feel in Mary's case, because of Spirit's desire to use any of the 14 to establish their own traditions and teachings further, in Mary's case, and because of the emotional injuries that Mary was going to have when she came to the planet this time round, Mary's received sexual projections for 2,000 years about being a whore or being a prostitute and so forth. The majority of that time, of course, she has not been one, right? And in the first century, it was only quite a short period of time, if you compare it with 2,000 years, that she was one. But because of these projections, there's a huge amount of pain to acknowledge about how unfairly treated we are at times. And I feel a lot of the rebellion feelings that we have are actually about the pain associated with our sense of injustice. Mm-hmm. So what we do in our sense of injustice, unfortunately, is we then perpetrate injustice upon others. And this is where we do the wrong thing. We'd be better off just feeling the injustice and going deeper into the sense of injustice and feeling that, rather than then perpetrating the injustice further. Because unfortunately, most of the time, we choose innocent people upon whom we perpetrate our injustice feelings. And that then causes them to feel a sense of injustice. Then there's a high likelihood of them getting rebellious and then them going into a very damaging state and doing other things, damaging other people. And this is the potential follow-on from our own sense of not wanting to feel the injustice rather than act upon it. Now, in my life, I've had a lot of injustice happen to myself, and I've had, of course, in this life, a lot of feelings about that. But it's been very rare for me to act upon them. And we need to all get into that space where it's rare, or if ever, that we act upon the feelings of injustice, and rather we just feel them and grieve them. Yeah. Okay.
That wanted to just...
Sorry, go on, Nate.
I was just going to say it's a pretty powerless place, that feeling that injustice.
Well, that's the problem, is that all rage is the addiction to power. And we need to understand that many of us have huge amounts of rage and huge amounts of desire to control. And in fact, we've spent most of our lives setting up a life that we can control in order to avoid a lot of things. But it's also an addiction to self-reliance. We don't trust God enough to go, I'm going to put myself in your hands, God. I'm going to put myself and my life in your hands, in the sense that I'm going to follow your laws and principles, and I'm going to follow the principles of truth and love, no matter how hard it is for me to do so. I'm going to follow it, and any emotion that comes up as a result of me following it, I'm going to feel, and not perpetrate any act of violence or emotion towards another person feeling that. Now, when we can do that, and that shift is normally around about the third sphere that occurs, when we do that, now you engage all of God's laws assisting you throughout the process. And that's the benefit of making those kind of choices. Unfortunately, for many of us, what we do is make different choices to that. We basically say to God, I don't really trust you yet. I hope you're there, but I'm not really sure. And I hope you love me. AJ's saying that you love me, but I don't really feel that really very much of the time at all. And, all these things that Jesus is talking about, I think I get at the soul level, but I don't like a lot of it, really. You think of it, for most of you, when you first heard some of the discussions, when you first came, how much rage was present during the presentation about something that I've said. So you have all of those emotions. And then as a result of those sort of emotions, there is this very strong resistance then to gaining further truth and knowing, progressing further along the divine love path. Not understanding, and this is something I've mentioned to Mary many times, is not understanding that actually God created you perfect. God didn't make any mistakes with you. God didn't create the damage nor the facade. And God knows who and what your potential is. And your potential far exceeds what your facade considers to be your potential.
Yep.
And your potential far exceeds, and it has the ability to overcome every tiny piece of damage that's ever been done to you, is able to be overcome the way God's designed your soul. God didn't make a mistake designing your soul. And so God has this beautiful, has created this beautiful being that has the ability to conquer all sin within it. We all have this innate ability, if we engage it with God, to conquer all sin, conquer all error. And once we do that and realise that, and we have that kind of trust and faith in God and what God's created, then we won't be so adverse to discovering our true self, right? But at the moment, many of us don't believe those things, and we are very adverse to discovering our true self because we're petrified that our true self is even worse than our damaged self. And that is a physical impossibility for our true self to be worse than our damaged self. Right?
We also fear, we also have this feeling, I know for myself, my facade self wants to create this life where I feel safe and comfortable. And as I think Rob mentioned yesterday, when sometimes we connect to our real self, it has these huge desires that trigger all of our fears, and we go, no, God, you didn't create me perfect. I can do it better. I know what's going to make me happier, instead of recognising that it's just a fear in my damaged self that's preventing my real self from being happier than I can possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the amount of pain in a reincarnated soul far exceeds by factors of hundreds the amount of pain in a person in their first incarnation. And the reason for that pain for a reincarnated soul is a lot about the loss. You cannot imagine the loss. It's impossible for anybody who's not reincarnated to imagine the extent of the loss that you experience coming back to an earth in its current state. Now, in the future, it may be different, but now, coming back to the earth in its current state, the loss is so intense, and yet God created the soul with the ability to even release from itself that amount of extreme pain. So that should give every person the confidence that any amount of pain that's within you can be released if you engage this process that God has designed for your soul to engage. Yeah. Rather than answer some more questions, we probably want to leave the talk there. What we've hoped we've done today is opened your mind and your awareness to this whole 1/3 of your life. And also, through Mary's personal experience, demonstrated to you how much many of your locked up emotions are actually related to your denial of that life and denial of what you do in that life. And what we'd like to encourage you to do is to discover what's going on in this life. There are good things going on in the life as well, by the way. And there are negative things going on in the life. And just like there are good things going on in your day-to-day life here on earth and negative things going on in your day-to-day life on earth. And what we'd like to encourage you to do with the help of your guides and with prayer is to discover it, what's going on, discover what you're in denial of, and allow yourselves to get beyond the facade and into the real stuff. And to get beyond the facade in each state, both in the sleep state and the awake state, so that you're beyond the facade and you're now in this place where you have these qualities that Mary's crossed out that she said she didn't have when she started. But the reality is faith, trust in God, integrity, desire for truth, desire for growth, and persistence, those kind of qualities that we listed yesterday, are going to be very essential for you in your coming months. And they will help you greatly. And what will happen is once this facade starts disappearing, so if we could just do it like this, if your facade starts disappearing in lots of areas, which it can do quite rapidly, What is going to be like, remember yesterday I described this as being like the egg white and this as being like the egg yolk. What happens when the shell goes? It's all just going to ooze out of you, isn't it? So instead of having to, spend all of your time trying to discover what this emotion was and that emotion is and trying to work it out and asking this person, asking that person, and discussing it with everybody because you have to, and you will find the emotion will just ooze out of you, right, and just naturally flow and come out of you. The more you release these different facades. And in the end, what you'll end up with, if you release most of the facade, you can see that all the damage was just going to ooze out of you and you're going to be left with the yolk. In the end, that's still this nice, soft thing that has the ability now to grow. And if we could take the analogy in a bad way to another state, the yolk is the embryo of the chicken, is it not? It contains the ability, it contains the genetic structure, if you like, for this creation, for this creature to grow. And it's very, very much the same with us. Without us connecting to this real self, true growth is not really going to be possible. This is where our real soul is. This is the thing that when you get beyond the seventh dimension and you no longer have any damage in you, this is going to continue to grow. It's going to be the only part of you that's left over, right? And bear in mind that you're a half of a soul, so there'll be a union of these two yolks, if you like, during this process.
And the creative power in that union.
Yeah.
Pretty.
Right? And if you can think about it, there's a lot of things we could take as an analogy from that, isn't there? With regard to even sexual union and so forth. There's a lot of patterns in there about what happens to the soul. And this is the way God teaches us through these patterns. And our feelings are, and probably more so now Mary's feelings than before, is that if you can be allowing of this damage and you can be honest about it and you can allow yourself to feel it as it really is rather than trying to maintain a facade, and you will rapidly then work through different damaged areas, and parts of your real self will sort of be like exposed. So if this is the damaged area around here, right, and eventually you work through this damage here, now can you see what's going to happen? The real self will begin to flow. For many of you, it will be for the very first time in your whole life that you've been your real self in one area. And then once you've worked through some more damage, now there's another vortex, if you like, where more of your real self can come out and flow. Can you see? It's going to be this slowly developing process, and it doesn't have to be that slow either. It just depends on your choice as to how rapidly it occurs. So what we hope that we've done this weekend is firstly help you work through the fact that there is the facade still in operation in many cases, and also help you see that the facade creates a lot of the damaging actions you take either in your awake state or in your sleep state. And hopefully today we've discussed with you this aspect of your sleep state and how getting to know what's happening in it is going to assist you greatly in your own progression towards God. But you're going to need to have courage to face it, because sometimes it ain't pretty. That's the trouble. So hopefully we've done that.